Gemini, the art of letting go and releasing the mental attachments that hold you back. There are moments in life when holding on feels safer than releasing, when the mind clings tightly to old beliefs, unfinished stories, and identities that once gave us comfort. As a Gemini, with your ever-curious, restless, and dual nature, the challenge of letting go often hides behind your quick thoughts and constant search for meaning. You carry conversations, memories, and even fragments of yourself long after they have served their purpose, weaving them into the threads of who you believe you are. Yet, deep down, you sense that liberation does not come from grasping tighter, but from loosening your grip. Letting go is not about forgetting, denying, or erasing. It is about honoring what has been, blessing it for what it taught you, and then choosing to step forward unburdened. It is about creating space for new truths, fresh experiences, and a version of yourself that is no longer confined by mental attachments. In this journey, you will come to understand that your greatest freedom lies not in gathering more, but in surrendering with grace. If these words touch something within you, let them settle in your heart. Share them with someone who may also need to hear them, and join us here in this circle of wisdom. Subscribe if you feel called to walk deeper on this path, for together we are learning to let go, and in that release, we discover who we truly are. Gate 1. For Gemini, the first step in the art of letting go begins with recognizing the invisible threads of mental attachment that weave themselves quietly into your daily life. These attachments are not always obvious. They can be beliefs you inherited from your family, the need to constantly prove your intelligence, or the expectation that you must always be 2 steps ahead in every conversation. Geminis, with their quicksilver minds, often gather ideas like treasures, stacking them one upon another until the weight becomes almost unbearable. The paradox is that while your mind craves freedom, it can just as easily trap you in endless loops of overthinking, clinging to what if and what should have been. Letting go for you, dear Gemini, is not about silence or emptiness, but about choosing what deserves space in your inner landscape. Imagine your thoughts as a library, vast, alive, filled with voices of the past and possibilities of the future. Some books are timeless, still worthy of your attention, but others are outdated, their words underlined in ink that no longer resonates with who you are becoming. Yet you keep them on the shelf, afraid that discarding them means discarding yourself. This is the first illusion, that you are what you cling to. The truth is, you are the reader, not the book. Consider how often you replayed a conversation from years ago, wishing you had said something different. Or how often you've carried the identity of being the smart one, the funny one, the one who always knows, even when it exhausts you to maintain that mask. These attachments can feel like safety nets, but they're also cages. To begin letting go, you must first see them clearly. Awareness is the key that unlocks the door to freedom. Without judgment, simply observe which thoughts repeat like an old melody, which identities weigh you down, which attachments whisper that you are incomplete without them. One Gemini I once worked with described her mind as a crowded train station where every thought demanded attention. She clung to the belief that she had to keep up with everyone's expectations, to respond instantly, to know everything. When she finally began journaling her repetitive thoughts, she saw the pattern. She was still carrying the voice of a parent who once told her she would never be enough. That awareness became her first act of letting go, not discarding the memory, but choosing not to let it dictate her present self. You too can begin this practice. Start by writing down the attachments you sense within you, the beliefs, roles, and stories you've been carrying. Do they still serve your growth? Or are they echoes of an old version of yourself? Allow yourself to ask, who am I without this attachment? The answer may not come immediately, but in that question lies the beginning of liberation. Letting go is not about abandoning your Gemini mind. It is about befriending it, guiding it, and reminding it that you are more than the stories it clings to. The first gate opens when you courageously turn inward and shine light on the mental attachments that have been holding you back. Once you see them, you are no longer fully bound by them. Gate 2. Once a Gemini recognizes the mental attachments that shape their inner world, the next challenge is a process of loosening their grip. The act of release feels like betrayal of family values, past identities, or even the promises they once made to themselves. But letting go is not betrayal. It is an act of deep alignment with the truth of the present moment. It is a realization that who you were yesterday does not need to dictate who you are today. And for Gemini, this realization can be both terrifying and liberating. Your mind thrives on collecting fragments, weaving connections, and holding on to narratives as if they were lifelines. You cling to friendships that have long drifted out of harmony, to old dreams that no longer inspire you, to roles you've outgrown but still perform because others expect it. Think of the times you've stayed in conversations that drained you, just because you fear being seen as unreliable or disloyal. Or the projects you carried on long past their expiration, because stopping felt like admitting failure. These attachments become invisible threads of identity, and yet they weigh you down like heavy chains. The practice of loosening begins with trust. Trust in yourself, trust in the flow of life, trust that by releasing one thing, you are making space for something more aligned to come. Imagine holding a handful of sand. The tighter you squeeze, the faster it slips away. But when you open your palm, the grains that are meant to stay will rest gently, while the rest will fall, leaving your hand light and free. Gemini, your journey of letting go works the same way. A man I once met, a Gemini in his mid-30s, shared how he had built his entire career around an identity he no longer loved. He had been the witty communicator, always networking, always shining in social spaces. But deep down, he longed for silence, for writing, for a life less crowded. Still, he feared that if he stopped performing this role, people would abandon him. When he finally allowed himself to step back, first by saying no to social events, then by carving quiet mornings for himself, he discovered that those who truly valued him remained, and the ones who drifted away were the very attachments keeping him from his own authenticity. His story reflects a truth every Gemini must learn. By releasing what no longer fits, you're not losing yourself. You are revealing yourself. In practical terms, you can begin this loosening by practicing conscious release rituals. Try meditation focused on exhalation, where each breath out symbolizes letting go of a thought or attachment. Or write letters to the people, roles, or beliefs you are ready to release. Letters you never have to send, but that allow you to speak your truth and then burn or tear the paper as a symbolic act of surrender. These small practices train your Gemini mind, which often resists silence, to experience the peace of letting go without fear. The deeper secret here is this. Your attachments are not your identity. They are costumes you wore for certain chapters of your life, and now you are free to take them off. Every time you release one, you expand into a more authentic version of yourself. Gemini's gift lies not only in adaptability, but also in renewal. And renewal is only possible when you create space that comes from loosening what no longer belongs. Gate 3. After loosening the grip on old attachments, Gemini enters a deeper layer of the journey, facing the emotions that rise when familiar dissolves. Letting go is not simply a mental process. It is emotional, spiritual, and physical. The mind might say, I am ready, but the heart trembles with grief, fear, or even anger at the thought of release. For Geminis, who often intellectualize experiences, this stage can feel uncomfortable because it requires slowing down, feeling deeply, and allowing emotions to flow without analyzing them into pieces. This is where the dual nature of Gemini becomes both a challenge and a gift. On one side, you want to move forward, to embrace change and new possibilities. On the other, you resist because part of you longs for certainty, for the safety of what you already know, even if it hurts. This inner conflict is not weakness. It is the very threshold you must cross to transform. The emotions you feel when letting go, sadness, nostalgia, emptiness, are not signs of failure, but proof that you are alive and capable of loving deeply. Think of it like the changing of seasons. When autumn comes, the trees let their leaves fall, not because they hate them, but because holding on will prevent new life from emerging in spring. The tree does not rush the process. It allows the leaves to wither, change color, drift slowly to the ground. This is the same invitation for you, Gemini, to witness your own inner autumn, to let yourself feel the ache of release without trying to hurry into the next beginning. I recall a Gemini woman who carried a deep attachment to a friendship that had grown toxic. For years, she replayed conversations, wondered if she should have done more, and carried guilt for wanting to walk away. When she finally allowed herself to cry, Not just think about it, but feel the grief fully. Something shifted. She realized that mourning the end of a connection was not weakness, but a natural part of letting it go. Only then could she open her life to new, healthier friendships. Her story reminds us that tears are not setbacks. They are sacred waters that cleanse a heart. One practice to help you through this stage is creating safe containers for emotional release. Set aside intentional time to sit with what you feel, whether through journaling, voice recording your emotions, or simply placing a hand on your heart and breathing through the waves. As a Gemini, your instinct might be to talk it out with others, which can be healing, but also be mindful of when conversation turns into overanalysis. The real healing comes not from explaining, but from allowing. This stage teaches you that emotions are not enemies. They are guides. When you feel resistance, it often points to the very attachment that needs to be released. When you feel grief, it shows you how much meaning that chapter carried, and that meaning will always live within you, even if the form changes. By embracing the emotional flow, you allow your dual nature to harmonize. The thinker and the feeler working together, both honoring the past and welcoming the future. Letting go is not a single act. It is a process, and in this process, your emotions are the compass. Trust them, follow their wisdom, and know that each wave you allow to pass through you is washing away another layer of what no longer serves. And beneath all those layers, the real Gemini, light, free, ever-evolving, begins to shine more clearly. Gate 4. As Gemini moves through the emotions of release, a new challenge appears. The tendency to refill the empty space too quickly. Your mind, wired for curiosity and movement, often rushes to replace what was lost with something new. Another project, another identity, another distraction. But true letting go is not about swapping one attachment for another. It is about cultivating the spaciousness within yourself to simply be, without needing constant definition. This is where Gemini learns the sacred art of emptiness. Emptiness is not a void to be feared, but a sanctuary where the soul can breathe. In a world that constantly demands productivity, opinions, and labels, the willingness to rest in openness is revolutionary. For Gemini, who is so used to defining themselves through words, ideas, and roles, this stage may feel like walking into silence for the first time and realizing it is not loneliness but freedom. Think of the chrysalis of a butterfly. Inside, the caterpillar dissolves into a state of pure potential. If it tried to rush the process or cling to its old form, transformation would never happen. Similarly, when you release attachments, you enter a chrysalis stage where you may feel undefined, uncertain, or even lost. This is not failure. It is a sacred pause before rebirth. For Gemini, this pause is essential because your transformation depends on allowing yourself to exist without constant mental labeling. I once met a Gemini man who, after leaving a long-term relationship, filled his days with endless social outings, travel, and new hobbies. Yet beneath the surface, he admitted he felt emptier than ever. Only when he allowed himself to stop, to sit alone without reaching for his phone, did he realize the space he feared was actually an invitation. He began meditating daily, something he once thought impossible for his restless mind, and over time, that silence became the ground from which a more authentic self could emerge. For you, Gemini, embracing this emptiness can be practiced through mindfulness. Try sitting quietly each morning, not seeking answers or stimulation, but simply noticing your breath and the space around you. Let the silence be a teacher. Resist the urge to label yourself in every moment. Instead, allow yourself to be a mystery, even to yourself. This state of openness is where inspiration will eventually arrive. Not because you chased it, but because you created space for it to find you. What you discover in this stage is profound. Your worth is not tied to constant doing, knowing, or proving. It is inherent, present even in stillness. The emptiness you once feared becomes a mirror showing you the truth, that you're already whole, even without the roles, the stories, and the attachments you once carried. And from this wholeness, Gemini is reborn, not as a fragment itself tied to the past, but as a being who knows the beauty of release, the strength of spaciousness, and the peace of simply being. Gate 5. As Gemini learns to embrace the spaciousness that follows release, a new horizon appears, the integration of wisdom. Letting go is not just about removing the old. It is about transforming what remains into fuel for your evolution. The lessons you gather from each attachment, whether it was a belief, a role, or a relationship, become stepping stones that guide you forward. Without integration, you risk repeating the same cycles. But with mindful reflection, you step into a higher level of clarity, where the past no longer chains you, but instead empowers you. For Gemini, whose mind is always alive with questions and connections, integration is a deeply natural gift. You can weave meaning from experiences, find patterns in the chaos, and articulate insights in ways that inspire others. Yet this gift becomes most powerful when it is not cluttered by old attachments. Once you release what no longer serves, your mind clears and suddenly wisdom flows through with ease. You no longer confuse noise for truth. You begin to recognize the quiet voice of intuition guiding you toward authenticity. A Gemini woman I worked with once shared how she always carried the belief that she had to be the life of the party to be loved. After consciously releasing that role, she felt lost at first, unsure who she was without it. But in her journaling, she began to notice new truths emerging. She didn't need to entertain to be valuable. Her quieter, reflective side was just as magnetic. Over time, she integrated this lesson into her life. She still enjoyed socializing, but no longer performed out of fear. Her relationships became more genuine, rooted in her essence rather than in her mask. This stage invites you to ask, what wisdom did this attachment carry? What did it teach me about love, about fear, about myself? Instead of discarding the past, integration allows you to harvest it. You can honor the role each attachment played without continuing to carry its weight. This is where Gemini transforms from being a restless collector of experiences into a conscious alchemist, distilling meaning and turning pain into wisdom. One practical way to integrate is through storytelling, whether to yourself in a journal or to others who resonate with your journey. Tell the story not as one of victimhood, but as one of growth. For example, rather than saying, I was trapped in a job I hated, you can reframe, that chapter taught me resilience, and it revealed the values I now honor in my work. Gemini's natural gift for words becomes a healing tool when used this way, transforming attachments into teachers. The deeper secret is this. Every release is also a rebirth. By letting go, you create not just space, but fertile ground for new possibilities. And when you integrate what you've learned, you don't just move forward, you evolve upward. This is the culmination of Gemini's art of letting go. Not erasing the past, but weaving it into the tapestry of wisdom that supports your freedom, authenticity, and growth. Conclusion. Gemini, the journey of letting go is not a straight line. It is a spiral that carries you deeper into yourself with each release. You began by noticing the attachments that silently shaped your identity, then loosening their grip with awareness and trust. You felt the emotions that arose when a familiar dissolved, honored the emptiness that followed, and discovered the peace of simply being. Finally, you gathered the wisdom hidden within each attachment and wove it into your evolving self. This is the art of letting go. Not a single act of surrender, but a lifelong practice of renewal, courage, and faith. What you now understand is that release does not diminish you. It expands you. Each belief, role, or story you set down frees your hands to hold something truer, lighter, more aligned. Letting go is not about losing. It is about finally making space for the fullness of who you are. And as a Gemini, with your endless curiosity and dual perspective, you are uniquely gifted to walk this path. You can honor both the past and the future, both the ache of release and the joy of rebirth, without losing your center. Remember this. The leaves fall not because they are unloved, but because the tree knows it must prepare for new life. In the same way, your soul understands that by letting go, you are not abandoning yourself. You are allowing yourself to flourish. The attachments you release become part of your roots, unseen but essential, nourishing your growth as you rise higher toward the light. So step forward now with grace. Breathe out what no longer belongs to you. Trust the spaciousness you have created. And when you feel ready, share your reflections, your story, or even just a single word in the comments below. This circle of wisdom grows stronger when each voice joins it. If this journey has touched you, let it continue. Share, subscribe, and stay with us as we walk together on this path of self-discovery and healing. Your freedom is waiting, and it begins every time you let go.